Okay, welcome, Jane. Thank you for bearing with us while we sort all that out. And the floor is yours now.
Hello, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there with you in person. I'm not sure if there's been any introductions yet, or should I introduce myself?
There was a brief introduction earlier, but if you could please introduce yourself.
Yeah, great. My presentation will probably walk you through who I am, but I know some of you. I've done some research on the Institute website to see who might be there today. So yeah, I'm Jane Henley. I founded the Green Building Council back in 2005, 6. More recently, I was the construction sector accord inside MB, leading the innovation work stream. And now I'm doing innovation at Oricon, horizontal and vertical, so very interesting. So today, I've got 20 minutes to take you through a bit of a journey. What I'm hoping to do is to give you a bit of a unique perspective on how I've been driving change across the sector for probably about 20 years, actually, since 2005, almost 20 years. And I hope that this helps you reflect on your role and also gives you some inspiration to refine and review what you're doing. So I'm going to move pretty quickly, cover a bit of territory. So sit back, nothing to take notes on, just to kind of take it in and enjoy our journey together and our time together. So I'm going to start back in 2005. The vision of the Green Building Council was pretty broad back in the day, and I had come from spending some time in Norway. That's where I really sort of found my love of sustainability and had experienced it firsthand. So when I came back to New Zealand after living there for 4 years, I was very much like, we're supposed to be a clean, green country and we're really not. And so I was pretty passionate about trying to do something about it. And, the vehicle of the Green Building Council was a great challenge. And so I don't know if you remember, the kind of theory of change right back at the start was to try and break the cycle of everybody saying that they want green, but they couldn't invest in it or couldn't get it if they were a tenant, or developers couldn't get money for it. And then the design and build community is saying, that they can do it, but nobody's wanting it. And so really our goal back then was to try and create demand. And so enable occupiers to specify a green building, ask for a green building, and really just change this cycle. So it was all really premised around this idea of creating a common language, which there really wasn't at the time. That's when kind of energy ratings of all sorts of things didn't really exist, but we were sort of building on that momentum of defining what green building was. So after that, I then moved on to the World Green Building Council, where I became the CEO. And we had also a sort of a different way to look at it. And that was really looking at where the benchmark is across the sector. So you can sort of see here, this is, building on the left-hand side, some buildings not meeting any sort of code, but most buildings sort of being in the middle, and setting the benchmark of a Green Building Council rating system or definition of green being in the top sort of 25%, top 30%. As you guys are the ones probably in the 5% over on the right. And the idea of the Green Building Council movement over time was that it would bring up practice. And this was applicable. The goal was for it to be applicable all around the world. And so I'd been doing that for a while and started to travel to lots of different countries. You can see that, and you guys know very well that it's not new. We have had natural ventilation for many years, but there's all sorts of different challenges and different sort of situations in different countries that we're trying to achieve different things, funded by different people, different levels of investment. And really the definition of housing and of building was extremely different all over the world. And so to use this one model of transformation and attaining to a particular standard was, I found it started to kind of question, what we were doing and whether that was the right way to do it. So probably about 4 years into that journey, I decided to sort of stop and take a check, ask ourselves how we were doing. And we did this pretty detailed system mapping. It's called system dynamics. Don't need to understand really what's in here, but you can see that it's complicated. And the point was to look at what are all the interactions that are occurring to keep us in the state that we're in, and looking at where are the leverage points that we might need to pull differently to sort of shift us to where we want to go. And that's where the question came up about, well, where is it that we want to go? And is that sort of top 25%, thinking that it's going to pull the market, is that actually going to get us where we want to go? And we were good at analyzing the influences of government and, where the money flowed and what developers needed and how occupants could ask for things differently. But we weren't very good at looking at ourselves. And so this particular graph gave me a bit of a eye-opener. And you see down the bottom here, I'll just circle it in yellow. Don't worry too much about taking it in. I'll give you the general sort of storyline. But it was basically telling us with this detailed mapping that we weren't going to get to the point of everybody everywhere experiencing a sustainable built environment. Our time frame was 35 years, so to 2050. And so it really gave me a reality check on, what is it we were trying to do? And so it was at that point that I decided to actually leave the World Green Building Council. I guess we had difference in opinion about our role, and it's all good, that there's certain, I think, agendas and certain theories of change pushing certain agendas. But for me, I wanted to aim for something bigger. I wanted to focus on this gap so that it wasn't just a small segment of the market receiving the benefits of green building or sustainable building. So that's really when it comes, that question of, are we doing, how are we doing? Well, it really depended on where we wanted to go. And for me, I had bigger ambitions. So at that point, why is it not changing? I decided to, I was already mostly basing myself out of Toronto at that point, decided to go back to school and studied at MIT and did an MBA, and was mostly interested in going there because they had system dynamic experts in the program. So I got pretty deep into that kind of analytical view of the world and thinking about how do we really drive change. And so then that took me to the World Bank and leading a program, amongst other things, but looking at how the investments that the bank made were looking at meeting their goal of 20% improvement on the bank's investments. And so they made a really simple tool called Edge that was focusing on improvement of 20% water, 20% energy, and 20% materials. And what this tool did is it calculated the return on investment. And for a bank, they needed to have their own kind of measurement verification system, and it needed to be a lot more simple than the other green building rating systems, mostly because it was focused on developing countries. And a lot of these countries didn't even have a building code. So we were talking Indonesia, many countries in Africa, Vietnam, quite a few countries in South America. And so the level of ambition couldn't be up in that kind of top 25%. It had to be much lower down the spectrum of what is it we're defining as good, as sustainable. And so I guess my whole idea of working with the top segment or the top part of the market really shifted back to how do we drive change and make this relevant to everybody. And that was super interesting. And then it kind of made me realize in those countries that there was a massive gap in, it was all good that we were, excuse me, creating demand, but the supply side of the industry wasn't very enabled. and that there were a bunch of other issues that were not being dealt with. And so we were kind of pushing hard on increasing the standards, but it was really just being added onto the cost because there was no focus on helping them actually get some sort of improvement during their process. And so what are we talking now? Sort of 10 years into it, I decided that somebody needed to focus a little bit more on the supply side. So it was around that time that I decided to come back to New Zealand as well and started to get focus on the supply side of the sector. And so that brings us really through to today and what I'm kind of keen to talk about with where we're at today. I've, especially in my time at the Accord, when I was an MB the last few years, was really focused on productivity. And kind of it's very coupled with skills and the whole decarbonisation agenda. I'm sure you've had some, if not today, I'm sure you'll have some sessions around what's happening in that space. And I know it's changeable. But really the productivity piece is the one that's got my attention mostly. And that's just because across the world, all of the different research papers and all different governments are looking at up to sort of 40% of wastage in projects due to rework, on-site delays, consenting, low use of technology, and many more issues. I know it sounds like a high number if you think about your projects. If you're a builder, it'd be pretty hard to get 40% of the cost out, but some of those costs might not sit with you. So kind of keen to unpack that a little bit more as well. So if we just look at the productivity equation a little bit more deeply, this is agriculture. This is the productivity information that Treasury get. So they measure adoption of technology versus over efficiency and how that benefits the sector. So you'll see here, agriculture, since all of the reforms in the 90s, had a big focus on adopting technology across the farms, across supply chains, everywhere. And you look at the level of efficiency, short drops sometimes, but mostly it's just that increase in adoption of technology has also increased the efficiency and productivity of the sector. And if we compare that to construction, this is actually Australian data, but ours is pretty much exactly the same. You see there's been an increase in technology slowly over the years, but it hasn't delivered any efficiency. Actually, our efficiency has dropped with the increase in technology. And overall, you see the black line in the middle there is decreasing productivity for our sector. You hear about this all the time, right? And a lot of people kind of go, well, so what? What are we going to do about it? And it's not until you start to unpack it and go, well, that actually has a flow-on effect to all of us and the supply chain. So I'm kind of interested in this piece. And if you think about our process as a sector, it's pretty much a game of snakes and ladders. There's all sorts of spots where you could meet a snake, and then you might have to climb back up a ladder, and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of places where there's that sort of disconnect, where technology is not helping, where communication's not necessarily very good. So there's lots of sort of opportunities in this crazy system that we have to lose time and lose money. So you may have heard of Mark Farmer. He did a report in the UK in 2016, and it was called Modernise or Die. And that was really looking at how the sector needed to change. Otherwise, we weren't going to be able to deliver on the changes that were coming down the pipeline. And so recently, we actually got Mark to do a bit of a summary of what they learned over that time. And it was pretty interesting. They had quite a focus on off-site manufacturing and modern methods of construction, which I'll talk a little bit about. But really, it was about skills and it was about technology adoption as well. And so there's quite a lot we can learn from these other countries who are a little bit further ahead than us at looking at this, productivity issue that's at the heart of the cost escalations that we're seeing in the industry. So in my kind of language, I feel like we need to focus on confidence and certainty. And it's spread across time issues, cost issues, quality issues, and sustainability issues. So, we used to talk about the kind of the golden triangle of time, cost, quality. I think we need to expand that out to include sustainability, because there is always the risk of sustainability being dropped off. If we see from the current thinking in government that we've seen recently, we see the cost of building and the cost of sustainability being seen as an add-on. You see some of the amazing headlines from pushback in the last couple of months around H1 and some of the standards. And then the idea of kind of talking about operating costs and benefits really doesn't even factor into these conversations. So we've got this sort of situation in New Zealand right now of cost of building being driven down. We're really, focused on how to get cost out, and we're really not talking about where that can come out, and really what the kind of trade-offs with kind of cutting some of the benefits out. So I'm really, really, really pushing quite hard on this conversation around, let's go for 20% improvement in process through standardization, improving consenting, digitization across the supply chain, not just within companies, and then just thinking differently about offsite and on-site choices. So visually, this sort of looks like dropping out 20% of that inefficiency and making sure that the sustainability is still included in the overall cost of the building, because we all know well, and I'm not going to get into it, what the long-term benefits, health benefits and societal benefits are from making sure we keep those costs included. Those benefits included. So one of the sort of things I learned from all the green building movement time is the importance of a common language. So in my time in the MB, we started doing some work around a common language. It did start off with just the green boxes being quite focused on offsite manufacturing. But then when we really started to learn the lessons from the UK and the Modernise or Die work, it was really clear that if we just push the offsite manufacturing piece, we weren't going to really get any benefits. It's just another way of doing the same thing. And so part of the equation had to be on process improvement, both depending if it's a government, but if it's government on the internal client side, and on the industry side, and how we organize ourselves across the supply chain. And the digitization part of it is very much around how the sector works together. So it's not just within one company. So this is the first attempt at a common language around modern methods of construction, and it's intentionally broad. And I'm really hoping that this starts to get a bit of traction, and we can pull it apart. And I know there's some things in there that as you see it for the first time, if you haven't seen this before, you might want to add and change. Because the construction sector accord actually got stopped with the change of government, this program didn't quite get completed. But some of us are still championing and sort of taking it forward in a voluntary sense. So yeah, this is the first attempt at a modern methods of construction common language. And just sort of drilling into a few examples around process improvement. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Kaingora's housing delivery system, HDS program. This is just some of the results that they've seen so far. It's been running for a good few years now. Must be 4 or 5 years. But there you can see here 14% savings against business as usual. And they're measuring that on a meter square rate. So you see here, they're saying that their BAU is about 3,500 per square meter, and that they've just through process improvement and how they're organizing themselves, not trying to get a lower cost of actual building, still going to 6-star. They've reduced their cost per square meter by 14%. And they think that they can get that again. So they think they can get this down to, I don't know, Matt was saying that 50% improvement, but I think if they can get down to the 20% that I would like to see, they'll be doing amazing. So if you haven't come across this work yet, I recommend that I can put you in touch, but like there's some really, really good lessons of how they're doing it with Inside Kaingora. And it may change. I know they've got a new board and some stuff going on there. And then the other piece where this is starting to happen, this process improvement is starting to happen, is Shane in the productivity hub that they have at the Simplicity site in Mount Wellington in Auckland. I know some of you will probably hate the build method, the material choice, but what it's doing is it's Shane saying that he's got a 20% cost improvement. All the sub-trades are charging industry rates, so there's no reduction in price. It's around process improvement again. It's managing the logistics, managing the timing, repeatable design, and really getting slick with what they're doing. So I really highly recommend that you can book in a time and actually go into the productivity hub. Very digitized as well. Here's a really simple Google Doc, Google spreadsheet linked kind of file where once they get once the foundation's down, they put the start date in, and that just filters through the whole project, including every sub-trade and when they come on site and how long they should take. And they're starting to benchmark the amount of time that people take to do their tasks as well. So they've got this kind of ongoing performance improvement data capturing process, which will end up giving them amazing feedback on, tasks, which they can potentially reward subbies for as they go through the process as well. And then my personal project that I'm involved with is Truss House. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. I'm not sure if Kim's in the room actually, but this is my passion project and something I'm involved with. So you've got the kind of big boys, and then you've got the smaller players. This is a startup. It's the reason why I'm so interested in it is because it's an enabling situation. It's not competing. So we're not building, we're not designing. It's really enabling through the software and through the approach. It is set up for passive house if whoever uses the system uses an Intello airtight barrier. Some of the stats that we're seeing so far, mostly from Canada, are faster construction, decreased time in the envelope, and then sub-trades much less time because they've got easy access, and it can be done on-site or off-site. And one of the reasons why I love it so much is because it can be scaled, because we're not being a builder, can be manufactured in all of the frame and truss plants around the country. So that's kind of my fly through on what I'm keen to focus on around productivity. A few examples of what I'm seeing, some of the innovations coming out into the sector. And so I guess my proposition to you guys is, what are you measuring in terms of productivity, and how are you viewing this? And, keen to kind of unpack what this means to Passive House, because I don't know your guys' sort of space in terms of that leadership end of the market that well. So that's my little journey. I hope that's been interesting. And if you'd like to get hold of me, there's my details, but I think I'm at time, so I'll stop there, and I'm not sure if you want to take any questions.
Thanks, Jane. That was great. Whistle-stop tour through. Lots of exciting things along the way, and lots of changes and twists and turns. So really interesting. And of course, as Passive House moves out of being quite a small niche in the market, then we need to think about all these kind of things about how we do grow and keep quality while increasing productivity and lowering cost as well.